Thank you, as always, for listening to Caleb vs. Self. On this episode, I get to speak with Chris from Good Roads, a YouTube channel dedicated to board sports and more specifically board building for those sports. We get a little nostalgic talking about some 80s skateboards and Tony Hawk Pro Skater. We talk about his goal with the Good Roads channel and how 3D printing has impacted board sports and building of those boards specifically. Check him out on YouTube as well as Instagram. Good Roads is the name of the channel. If you want to check out specifically doing board builds, his channel is fantastic to go to. And last but not least, he has a Patreon. So if you want to see more of those awesome board builds, please go and check it out. Links are all in the description below, and hopefully you enjoy this conversation. I know that I do. All right, man. I appreciate you coming on. This is Chris from Good Roads, the board maker, the board sports guy, the DIY board. I mean, I don't know. How would you ultimately describe what it is that you do?
I try to DIY as many pieces of board sport equipment, components, etc. as possible. I think the board building community would call themselves builders or makers, or sometimes you borrow the term shapers from surfing. That's what people who make surfboards are called. Sometimes people in other board sports will call themselves that, but sometimes people are like, no, that's a surf thing. We can't really step on toes there, but I think it's applicable.
Yeah, I mean, a good part of it is being by that sand belt and using hand saws and small saws to, get your molds right and do all that. So I definitely see how it could be kind of crossover, if you will. But for you, Where does getting into board sports start for you? I know your favorite is mountain boarding.
Oh, wow. You did your research. Yes, it is.
But how does one, for you, like your story, how did you get into that?
Well, I mean, right before we started chatting, we were talking about how people of a certain age, skating and board sports was such a thing because of the X Games and because of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. And I don't remember when I started thinking snowboarding was cool, but somewhere along the way I did. And we played a bunch of games. They had 1080 on the N64. And then I went to sleep when I was in middle school. I went to sleep over at my best friend's house. And the video game rental store, and I'm dating myself, they didn't have 1080, so we're like, well, we could get this Olympics game that has a little snowboarding, or this Tony Hawk thing, which is skateboarding, and I don't know about that. So we got Tony Hawk, and we stayed up all night playing it. And the next morning, we went out into his garage and grabbed some of his, I think, older brother's 80s Pal Peralta decks, big boaty things, and kicked around, and was hooked, completely hooked after that.
I just remember getting Tony Hawk Pro Skater was on a demo disc you could get from Toys R Us on PS1. That was good. You could only get the first level, but me and my brother played the ever-living crap out of that level.
I remember playing that for, what was the bike one?
Dave Mirra BMX.
Dave Mirra, yeah. I remember playing the first two levels of that over and over and over again on some demo disc. Those games are so much fun.
They are. And I feel like culturally, for people of our kind of little niche age generation, if you will, those hit hard. Those hit harder than most people realize. Because no matter who you talk to, if you bring up one of those two games, they're like, oh, hell yeah, I remember playing that. Yeah,
because it's not just, it has the cultural sticking power of hitting board sports or hitting skateboarding, BMX at peak, extreme 90s advertising. But it also, it introduced so many people to so much good music that they hadn't been exposed to before. And the soundtracks for those games still crush.
Yes, I remember Tony Hawk had Rage Against the Machine. That was the first time I had heard them.
Yep.
And I remember Dave Mirra had a Sublime track on it. And that was the first time I had heard them.
Tony Hawk had Primus and had Goldfinger, which was I think, we were a little bit, if I'm guessing, but I imagine if you had this similar experience with the games, we're about the same age, came a little bit after the ska wave. So it was a lot of people's first introduction into that and being like, oh yeah, trumpets are great.
Yes, yeah. That's so cool. From there though, right? Obviously you've got those old 80s decks. Do they even have the little side rails, the plastic side rails?
Oh my God. The one, so I borrowed one from my friend. And it was a gray deck with whoever had it first to cut little birds and stuff into the grip tape, and it had red and blue wheels and red and blue side rails and the nose and tail stops, and not like the ones that they're making for
Wow.
freestyle now, like big chunky ones that probably
Yes.
weighed a pound each.
Massive.
Oh, dude, it was so cool. It was so cool. And I think I still like riding big Bodie boards, and I think it's because that's where I started.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a cousin that had one of those decks, and the bottom it was all wood, but it looked like it had like stickers almost all over it, as opposed to like
Yeah.
a graphic.
Yeah.
Which, man, talk about a throwback. But anyway, from there, right? What does the journey look like? Are you into freestyle skating, longboarding, mountain board? Like, how do you end up finding all these other board sports?
Well, yeah. So I did eventually around the same time. I was able to get into snowboarding, which skating I really like. I still really like, and I've been at it for years. And I had never really got any good at it at street skating anyway, or any trick style skating. I've actually been kind of getting better at it over the last year than I think I ever had before, but kind of a different story. So while I was skating, kicking around town, I was also snowboarding, which I just love the mechanics of it. I still think I think that's my favorite board sport in terms of the way it feels to do it, like cruising a hill on a snowboard, engaging with your edges, playing, dancing with physics. It's like it's a blast. I'm also not very good at snowboarding. This is going to be a trend. I'm not very good at most of the board sports that I do. But I was a kid, and I thought I was freaking Tony Hawk, and I was going to be the next big snowboarder or whatever. So I had to cross train, and you'd see advertisements every now and then for these things called mountain boards, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get a mountain board. It's going to make me so much better at snowboarding. There isn't a whole lot of cross pollination there because you don't have edges, and that's such an important part of snowboarding well. But I got one. I saved up and I went halves with my parents on it. And I loved it. And I ended up putting a lot more. I mean, you have more opportunity to do it because you can ride basically 3/4 of the year as long as it's not muddy. And I toured AM a little bit. I went to a couple competitions and competed AM, and I'm still pretty intermediate. I actually just went to my first event probably in like a good 15, maybe longer years. This past May, this thing called Colorado out in Denver area. And it was sick. It was just so good it's such a small sport. It was so good to be together with a bunch of other riders and get to participate and hang.
It's
ride.
definitely more niche as far as the board sports are concerned. And for those who are listening who aren't really familiar, imagine an elongated standard skateboard deck with massive trucks where the wheels are higher typically than the deck. And correct me if I'm wrong, some of them might actually be like air-filled tires. Some of them might just be fully rubber.
Yeah, most of them are. Most of them are pneumatic. There was a category for what we called hard wheel mountain boards for a while, but it's just what you'd call an off-road skateboard now, and it kind of fell out of favor as a competitive category. They're still made. They're fun, but the sport itself, as far as like competition level stuff, everybody's riding pneumatic tires.
Gotcha. And for the straps, if you will, it's not like snowboard bindings. It's just a single, U-shape, upside down U-shaped strap that just goes over your one part of your foot. That's it, typically, right?
Yeah. It's really similar to like the ankle strap or heel strap on a snowboard, except it would be on the outside of the foot where the ratchet is one anchor point, and then the other anchor point is up by your inside of your foot on the toe. So it gives you a lot of coverage over the whole top of your foot, and the modern ones are nicely contoured to be comfortable. I think something that's really important to point out, because I have the impression that there's a misconception that mountain boarding is like particularly dangerous as far as board sports goes. I disagree with that. You can kick out if you really need to. You can just hop out of the bindings. It takes a little practice to learn how to do. And honestly, if you're riding more aggressive terrain, it's probably not what you want to do. But you are not strapped in the way you are in a snowboard, at least in the culture in the United States. In other countries, they wear heel straps, and if you do that, you really are strapped in. But that tends to be the higher level riders.
That sounds way more outrageous, because bailing on a snowboard, at least in my brain, right, for the few times I've snowboarded, which haven't gone well. But when I'm bailing, I'm at least in the snow. Whereas,
Yeah.
off-road skateboard, mountain board, when I bail, I'm imagining there's the potential for trees, rocks, some pretty hard stuff that you could probably eat it on.
Yeah, so I mean, compared to snowboarding, the falls hurt more. The mountain boarding culture is a lot better about protective gear than skate culture is. It's really common to like almost every like. It's really rare to see someone riding without a helmet. Most people wear knee pads, and a lot of people do wrist guards and elbow pads on top of that, and that makes a huge difference. The
I can
difference between
imagine.
falling on a rock from 6 feet in the air with
Yeah.
nothing on your knees versus knee pads is like you don't really even feel it. Um, they're the big beefy ones, similar to what you'd see in like vert skating. So yeah, I mean, a fall on a snowboard is going to hurt less. But I personally, I think even if you're like riding flat on a skateboard and like you land wrong, the board zips out from under your feet and you fall onto concrete, I think that hurts more than falling from 6 feet in the air into dirt. And I've done both. And I've done the second one a lot. Actually, I've done the first one a lot too, but yeah.
Well, going into the actual boards themselves, obviously your YouTube channel is mainly focused. Granted, there's a few other pretty cool things scattered in there as far as a little more like maker type stuff, like the 3D printed koozie and the fingerboard thing that you just did. What, yesterday,
Yeah.
2 days ago, you
Yeah.
just put that up. As far as boards though themselves, how did you get into saying, "Hey, let me see what it takes to build an actual deck on my own"?
I have no idea. I've been
Okay.
trying to figure that out. Like, I don't know where it came from. I have this base level impulse that when I like something or think it's interesting, I I have to make it. And it's something that I've had to fight a lot, or I have to do it. I have to get involved, right? It's not enough to like something. I have to try it. And for a while it meant I had way too many hobbies. And I wasn't good at any of them, which is fine.
That's why they're
But
hobbies.
that's why they're hobbies. But it's also like I definitely got to the point where I'm like, man, do I need another expensive, time consuming, messy hobby? I think it was like flint napping or something. I'm like, dude, I don't need to learn how to do that. It's just let it be cool. Just let it be cool. Don't
Right.
You got other stuff going on. I started I'm that my first, not the Palo Peralta board that I borrowed from my friend, but the first good skateboard I got a Walmart board that I broke, and then I got a Tony Hawk setup, or a Birdhouse setup, with Spitfires and I think Hyperlights for the trucks. And when it had gotten worn out, I started messing with it right away. I put an extra set of trucks on it, an extra set of wheels on it, so it had 8, and the nose and tail both had trucks on it, so you could get up into a manual but still turn. It was really easy to balance the manual. It was just something to mess with. And then I got into board building proper in college. I spent a ton of time in the wood shop, and I went to school in Philly. I had my mountain board with me, and there wasn't a whole lot of space to mount board. And I had a lot of friends who were getting into longboarding, and it's in college, so I was broke, but I had access to wood. So I started trying to make boards. I started with a style of deck called VLAM, which is vertically laminated, where you take strips of wood and glue them side by side, long ways. And you can make some really beautiful, like cruiser, old school style looking decks that way. I think I made 3 of those before I started pressing. And I did the first deck I pressed, I used plywood that I got from a hobby shop. And yeah, from there, it's been an exploration of different techniques. I did a company for a little while called Low Tide Rides, where I did custom builds for people, mainly working with like bamboo and kind of specialty hardwood veneers as cross grains. As far as I know, some of those decks are still floating around.
That's pretty wild
Yeah,
to have some of your builds still out there, given especially like the way people can really use and abuse decks.
yeah. I mean, on the one hand, they were all longboards, and they were longboards that kind of tended towards the cruiser, style of riding.
Sure.
But it's been a couple of years, so the people who have them, I guess, like them enough to take care of them, which makes me happy, because they were art too, in addition to being boards.
Right. At what point did you just say, "Hey, let me start filming this stuff"? Because it looks like about 2 years ago, but that doesn't mean you weren't filming stuff before then.
So when I got started, there was this website. It was a longboarding community called Silverfish Longboarding, and it was like the hub for the sport or sports because there's a ton of different designations. And they had a super rich, vibrant board building sub forum, and that's where I learned almost everything I knew about board building. And it went away, and it bums me out that it's gone. It was such a good resource. You can still kind of dig into it with the Wayback Machine, but a big part of wanting to document my builds was, well, I was doing them anyway, right? And I wanted to do more of them. And I was toying with the idea of wanting to start a company, which that is still the goal, to try to grow to the point where I'm doing that in addition to the YouTube stuff. But I also wanted to pay it forward. There was no centralized resource for all of these different building techniques. And the first project I did was an experiment that I wanted to do for myself, the 0 degree baseplate, which those videos aren't very good. So watch with a grain of salt, I guess.
Right.
But all the stuff that I started when I started documenting board building, like not just, hey, this is, I'm adding fiberglass to this deck, or I'm experimenting with 3D printed molds, like the video series I have on how to make a deck out of Baltic birch, the videos that I do on styrofoam molds, like those are techniques I picked up a long time ago. And I just want to be a resource. I want to get that information out there so that people like me, when I was younger, and still to this day, when I'm trying to learn how to make a snowboard, which I've never done before until last year, I wanted to just have a centralized place where people could digest that information. That's also the reason behind a lot of why I'm doing like the non-board components, the non-deck components, the wheels and the trucks, because I went looking for those videos, 15 years ago, and they didn't exist, and they still didn't exist. So I make them so that other people can get that information and see how those parts are made and try making them for themselves.
And those videos really, it looks like, take you out of your element between the trucks, which you're getting into a whole other space of having to work with metals and melting it down and getting the aluminum blocks and making the molds. And I can only imagine how much of a pain in the butt tamping down sand was for just to get everything perfect. But
yeah, that was surprising. It was a surprisingly physically demanding project. Like, it was mentally demanding because of designing all the mold geometry, like you said, it's really fun. Like I said before, like I collect hobbies. Like these, getting to learn to cast metal is sick. Getting to learn to cast urethane is like, I love this stuff. It's so much fun to be able to pick up crafts and I don't know, diversify the things that I can make myself. It makes me all like giddy. But I thought for sure that the hard part of that project was going to be designing the mold geometry, and I was only like halfway there. Actually doing it was just as hard.
yeah, I mean, it looked super labor intensive, but very cool. And like a lot of your builds, when you're going through them, what I like about it specifically is how you point out some of the things that either you had to change, you had to do better, or could do better in the future. Like if you were to do it all over again. And I don't know that you're going to be doing trucks all over again anytime soon, but
Yeah.
okay. But when you're going through it, whether it's the skim board, whether it's, some of the feedback that you get, whether it's on Reddit, I've seen people post some of your comments where people are coming back and using and giving you the comments of, hey, I did this a little bit differently, and I built this one with my kids, and that was something that really was really best, cool, man. Right?
Those are the best. The ones whenever I get them I get the Instagram personal messages. I get people hit me up on Facebook, and man, I love when it's a dad, or even I had a granddad be like, the granddad didn't know anything about skateboarding, but he made one for his grandson. I'm like, that rocks. That's so cool.
That is
what cool. An awesome project and gift to do with, the people you love.
Does that feel like your end goal as being a resource is working when you see stuff like that come through?
Yeah. Yeah. For where I am now, like, for the place I'd like Good Roads for the place I'd like Good Roads as a company to go in the future, as far as not just making content, but also producing boards. And eventually, like any other board sport company, it'd be sick to have like a team of riders and all that. But it's pretty aspirational for right now. But for where I am right now, for what I'm doing right now, when it happens, the best part of my day is when I get a message with a board that someone has built using the information I put out there, and they show it to me, and that makes me so happy. And it doesn't matter if, like if someone makes an awesome board, I get excited because I love seeing people make good stuff. But even people who even when the boards aren't that great, it still makes me so happy because you got to start somewhere, and you're going to have more, in my opinion,
Sure.
You're going to have more fun on that crappy board that you built yourself than you're going to have on one that you bought in the store that's nicer.
Do you feel like that's generally true for anything that you build and or make?
No.
Okay.
Because I cannot. Well, I don't know. That's a fun, challenging question.
The blood, sweat, and tears put into something, even though it might have sucked or it might not have, ultimately been what you wanted. You remember the moment that, I don't know, your saw blade went dull and chipped up the board, or when you know what I mean? Like there's got to be those moments, and you look at a deck that to somebody else might be like, this is a garbage deck, and you're looking at it like, man, I remember when I made this mistake and that mistake, and et cetera, et cetera. Like there's more nostalgia attached to something that you've made.
Yeah, certainly. I think the reason I kind of hesitated there is, I guess, like I've made a lot of stuff that aren't boards. And I think there is kind of like a level to which like it has to function at least to a certain degree before you can enjoy it, where it stops being just like, the place that I went is instruments. I've built a very small number of instruments, and there's a joke in the mandolin building world. It's like, that's not a mandolin, that's a mandolin shaped object, right?
Okay.
It's like, you have to be able to play it, using that example again. Like if you can play the instrument, you've made it yourself, even if it's not perfect, even if the action's a little wonky or the sound's a little odd, then like, yes, you get so excited, but you have to be able to play it. Otherwise it's kind of just a bummer and a learning experience, which is still super valuable. But I think boards are easy enough to make where if you succeed in making it, like if your layup goes well and the glue cures properly and you don't have DLAM and there's not like structural issues with the board, you'll be able to ride it. So you kind of like, if you succeed enough in the build to get above that floor of enjoyment, it's really easy to make a board that's functional. And if you've done that, you'll have a lot of fun on it for all the reasons that you mentioned.
I guess from my perspective, if I were to do it and I would use your channel, the likelihood of failure is minimized to such a great degree if I'm following your videos step by step, right? Most likely it'll be a functional board.
Yeah.
Because of the guide that you've put together.
Yeah, I've failed a lot, and I'm trying to show people how to not fail. Or at least try to show people how to build boards in ways that are less prone to failure. And there's very much two tracks of content on the channel that I put out. One is, here's how you can make, right? Here's how you can make a longboard. Here's how you can make a skimboard. Here's how you can make
snowboard.
Here's how you, not that one. That's the other track. The other track is, I'm learning how to make this.
Okay.
Right. So a lot of people got a lot of good information out of my snowboard build, but I still have no idea what I'm doing in that world. Like that board I got 5 days on the hill before the base sheet came off, and it was awesome. And I'm like, 5 is plenty. I'd like to have more, but I'll have to build another one at some point. But like, I haven't made enough mistakes. I don't have enough experience building snowboards and composites in general to do that. Not idiot proof is kind of like I don't want to be mean about it, but like,
sure.
Here's a foolproof or failure proof way of getting something usable if you want to get started with it, right? My powder surfer videos are good for that if you want to do something for snow, because it's the same Baltic birch technique that gets used in a lot of the other easy builds. Mm-hmm. The snowboard was maybe the hardest thing I've ever built. It's that or one of the instruments I built. Like one of those two things. And they were hard for different reasons, but like I have like such an immense respect for snowboard manufacturers, because to some degree they're all handmade, and I do not understand how they can get the prices so low because it's nuts. Like even the materials are expensive, so it's pretty wild.
Have you ever thought about like reaching out to a snowboard builder and just having a conversation, a cup of coffee, and just kind of being able to pick somebody's mind, or not even exclusively to snowboards, any other board type as well? Have you ever gotten a chance to do that? Is that something you would want to do?
Yeah, and yeah, I've had. I mean, there are a bunch of board building communities. They're kind of disseminated across the internet. Um, the snowboard building one's really strong and super supportive. There's a great snowboard building Facebook group. There's a handful of skateboard building Facebook groups. People will reach out over Twitter and social media. I've had a lot of conversations with other people who are building boards, but also building just action sports stuff of different types. Um, I recently got to tour Carver and Stone, which is a skateboard manufacturer, a factory in North Carolina, and that was rad. That was like, because most of the people I'm talking to at this point are either small builders like myself, or a little bit more experienced, like doing small volume, one person job, and getting to see boards made in quantity was wild, man. It was like walking into Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. The doors opened up, and it was just like, oh my god, this is so sick. And I got to hang with them and talk shop with them for a while. So that was really cool.
Was
And
there any little piece of information you felt like you gleaned, or was it just an overwhelming like, oh
oh, there
my
was a
god?
ton. There was, well, it was pretty cool because like in a lot of ways it's the same process that all the hobbyists do. It's just better optimized. The people do a lot more of it, so they're better at it and faster at it. Um, I'm going to do a video on the whole thing. They have a cool service where they do custom boards, and I had a board made, and we'll do the whole process in that. But the big piece of the big thing that I took away, which was awesome, was that they have 10 presses. And I talked with the guy who owns the company. He said it was okay for me to share this information. They're all wood frame. They are not metal, which is crazy to me because I've been trying to source C-beam for a long time, and it turns out I don't need to. And I think that's really amazing nugget of information for anybody who's out there doing DIY stuff too, because it really lowers the barrier to entry as far as manufacturing a press goes.
That's pretty remarkable. I mean,
Yeah.
given that you have such a a large company doing things in a way that, I don't know, I guess that wouldn't be my thought is to how they did it.
Yeah, I didn't expect it either. They're using a slightly different mechanic in their press to apply the pressure, and I think it is because of that a slightly lower pressure press. But there's a lot of debate in the industry about whether you want to go, to pneumatic or hydraulic cylinders full bore and really crush all the wood down, or if you want to leave the fibers intact. That's all a little bit too technical for my level of knowledge, but seems to be working for them because they're doing gangbusters work. They were so busy,
Right.
And they make good decks. So
That's pretty cool. Well, let me keep going down in this maker space a little bit and talk about,
sure.
it seems to be there's a significant impact just in your builds, but I imagine for most DIYers and hobbyists with 3D printing, whether you're making actual molds instead of having to use styrofoam, using it to be able to, I'm going to butcher this, but it's the mold for the wheel so that you can start creating
Yeah.
your own wheels.
Yeah, you
How
didn't
much
butcher
of an
that. That's right.
impact has 3D printing had, not just in your space, but just in the maker space as a whole, I guess?
Well, I think of the makerspace in the whole, it's been world changing. Um, I'm one of the people who gets 3D printers because they're tools. A lot of people get them as a hobby and like making little stuff, and that never really appealed to me. I'm not foo-fooing it or anything. I actually hate working on my printers. There's few things that make me madder than having to tinker with a 3D printer, but I have to do it because it's so much of what I'm doing with my business. For me, I don't even know how to begin describing how much of a game changer it was. So, for example, the wheel molds.
Mm-hmm.
there's a component in that, which is the bearing seat, which is the part of the wheel that the bearing has to sit in. It has to be really precise for it to be anything resembling like a legitimate wheel. The first set of wheels I made using FDM molds, which are printed filament laid down line by line. And printers have resolution. So an FDM mold has a lower resolution, which means a lot of post-processing. You have to do a lot of sanding. Mm-hmm. And the cores of those wheels were 3D printed, which meant I got accurate bearing seats-ish. And they were also made out of a material that kind of wore down over time. It was PETG, if anyone's interested in 3D printing. It's just not the level of precision that you would see in a professionally made product. It's not like the other alternative before 3D printing would have been machined aluminum or steel, which is what all the professionally made wheels are made out of. I got a resin printer, and the level of accuracy in resin printers is like a power of 10 higher. And that allowed me to get perfect bearing seats. And I've only made the one set of wheels using those molds for now. But I want to go back to it and make a bunch of them. And like I'll be making I'll be making wheels at like comparable to factory made wheels as far as, specs go. Sure. Of the shape. Like I got to find a good urethane still, but so that's like huge. Like the whole, nobody's made wheels at home and documented it or put it on YouTube. It actually turns out that a handful of people in the electric skate world did do that. But I hadn't really explored that world. So shout out to them for doing it first. Same thing with the trucks. It's precision at a price that a hobbyist can afford, right? It's even the skateboard molds, right? Which you can do the foam molds. They work pretty dang well, and you can get them fairly accurate, and you can make wood molds, and you can get them really precise, but it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work and finicky sanding and mating of the two sides and everything. Or you can have them machined, or you can cast them out of concrete using a blank, but you don't get control over your shape if you do it that way.
Right. You're just making a copy of that board if you do it that way, right?
Which is fine. But if you're trying to make your own shapes, which is what I want to do, having control over something like that, if you want to get it to a place where it's in a computer, which means you can iterate, you can go in and tweak things if you need to, you'd have to get it machined. And you'd either have to have the mill, or you'd have to farm it out. And there are a couple services that will do that for you, which is pretty cool. But 3D printing, it takes a couple days, but it's relatively cheap. Like the one of the most well-known and least expensive printers on the market, the Ender 3, has a build volume where the X and Y are 8.6 inches, which is just wide enough to make yourself a standard skateboard mold. I don't know, dude. I'm getting like caught up trying to answer that question because the answer's too big. It's like, how big is it? It's freaking huge. It's huge.
That's probably not the greatest question, but I definitely
No. It's a great question. It's just like, man, how do I answer this? It's
right. Okay. Well,
yes, it's a big deal. It's a very big deal.
It's super impactful. As well as oh man, now I'm gonna have a brain fart. The spacer that you use in order to get your holes.
Oh, the mountain board wedges. Oh, the drilling guide. Yeah.
Yes, the drilling guide. What's the one on Good Roads? I'm drawing a blank in my brain.
It's called the Scarab.
The Scarab, yes. Did that birth itself from being able to 3D print as well?
Yeah, and so did actually all the tools that I have available started that way. There were tools and processes that I wanted to be able to do, so I'd design a tool for myself, print it. If it worked well, I would try to improve it and or make it pretty, and then I'd either say, hey, I'm going to make these available for other people to buy, or people would be like, yo, where can I buy those? which is always really encouraging. But yeah, the drilling guide was that. The drilling guide, like, and it was interesting too, because I put out a lot of my designs open source. I would like to get to a place where I've got all the major components of a board that you can make by yourself. I have an open source version available. So I've got actually two different wheel kits. I've got a kit for casting your own bushings. I've got a kind of standard skate deck mold. And when the trucks are done, when I feel like I'm getting regular usable casts, the design for the trucks will be open source. The casting accoutrement that go with it, I think I'm going to charge for because it was so much work.
Right.
But
I can imagine. Is for Good
yeah.
Roads the long-term goal here? Is it to have like, all right, here's pretty much everything open source. So if you want to do it from scratch, here you go.
Yeah.
Then there is the second layer, which is, like somebody like me, look, I don't have the 3D printer. I don't have all this stuff. Can I just buy a kit, if you will, from you so that then I can create my own board and then put everything together? And then last but not least, it would be like a to Z. Here's everything you need to make a standard longboard deck. Like, is that where you're looking to eventually go?
I'm not so sure about the third one.
Okay.
There are a lot of companies out there there's one major company out there that does that very well, which is Roar Rocket, who I've partnered with, got a design coming out with them. Actually, don't know because they keep getting stuck with lockdown because you're in Canada.
Oh, gotcha.
But eventually I'll have a board design coming out with them. The second thing is absolutely something I'd be interested in is like, basically, if you don't have a printer, let me print it for you.
Right.
And then something else I'd like to do is like, I want to have like a mother recipe out. So the resin printed wheel molds is a really good example of this. Those are out, open source. It's a 60 millimeter pool wheel. And what I'd like to do going forward, and I haven't really floated this idea publicly, but I'd be curious to hear people's reaction, would be I'd do a video on how to take that open source design, modify it to make whatever style wheel you want. I'm going to use that to make a street wheel. I asked people what kind of street wheel they'd like to see, so I've got some ideas there. And then I can do a bunch of other wheel mold designs, and those would be for sale and not open. Like the files or the printing files or the molds themselves would be for sale.
Gotcha.
The idea being that, like, okay, I do want to make this stuff open source so that other people can make their parts and get their designs out there. But what I really want is for other people to make their own designs. And if you're just using my stuff, you're not doing that. It's awesome. If I'm getting you building boards and you're using my molds or whatever to do that, I'm stoked. But like, I want to make my stuff and I want you to make your stuff.
Right.
Because I don't know, that's part of why I want to get so many people building, because everybody would, if they had their ideal setup for whatever sport it is that they enjoy, everybody would make something slightly different, and everybody's got different creative directions that they'd go in, and it would mean more products in the market, more shops, it's kind of already a flooded market to begin with, but if you're doing something unique, if you're doing something different, or doing something exceptionally well, then I'd love to see it,
I mean, you say it's flooded, but I do feel like, interestingly enough, like some of the board sports outside of, skateboarding and longboarding really aren't great at pulling new people in a whole lot. And I feel like a channel like yours, like you said, lowers that point of entry, if you will, to be able to get into the sport, into building, into using all this stuff. And not only that, like one of my favorite videos on your channel is the T-Ride free ride, like just showing how like relaxing it can be. It doesn't have to be such an intense, crazy, doing backflips and falling 6 feet onto dirt or whatever. Like it can just be an enjoyable hike / ride and just chill vibes. Like that's
the video
really
Caleb's talking about is a mountain board edit that I did last fall, which was just it was really, really enjoyable to put together. And one of my best friends actually did the backing track for that. So DD Walker's, if you want to check out his music, it's rad.
Don't worry.
Oh, well, it's just, he's a homie. So I wanted to put it out there.
And that was a really cool song to put in there too. Like that was very like you said, 80s kind of chill vibe.
Yeah, it worked out. And I think it fit the editing a part is so different than editing a YouTube video. And it's so fun. and you have to integrate really closely with music.
Mm-hmm.
And, being a musician, I enjoy that, but also like you have to edit at a much higher caliber, if that makes any sense.
No,
I
it
don't know.
does.
It's more demanding, but it's fun.
The transitions have to really be on point, and even
Yeah.
stylistically, how you shoot something against what the music actually is can matter. So it's definitely right.
Yeah.
For that though, you also mentioned like that was at a point in your life last year where you're just like, I need to take a break. I had a couple of failed designs. I needed to go clear
Yeah.
my head. How
Yeah.
important is that for you as well? Being able to say, hey, time out. I got a little too much going on. Let me just go explore.
I'm very bad at it, and I'm trying to get better at it. The fingerboard obstacle you mentioned earlier on was sort of that. Over this past week, like I punted and said, you know what, we're putting the video out on Saturday this week. Don't sweat it for Friday. I was so burned out after the trucks project. That really should have been like 2 or 3 videos, and I did it in one, and I was just completely spent. Some of the circumstances I'm in with the company right now, and things that I've got in the works, I wasn't able to take a break the way that I really should have.
Sure.
But I'm really trying to get better at that. And last year when I did the T-Ride, it was something I'd wanted to do anyway. It was the right time of year for it. Falls, I think I mentioned it in the video, it's my favorite time of year. It's also my favorite time of year to mountain board because it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And what had happened was I spent like probably a month making something like 27 sets of bushings, custom bushings that were like multiple color pours, and they were Halloween themed. And I was going to do this whole big thing, and it's going to be the first component that I was going to sell on the channel. First time I sold anything that you could actually use on a board. And I was testing a deck that I made, and it crumbled. I had some of my bushings in it, and they fell apart. And it was like it was so much work out the window. And it was this thing that I had been really excited about making a fun video for, and releasing and getting the hype up and getting to do the goofy holiday. And I was going to dress I hadn't figured it out, but I was going to dress in a costume or something. And just having that like not happen. And yeah, I got a lot of really nice comments on that video. I want to point that out. You said before that like I'll showcase the ways that things don't go well, or things that I know I could do better. I think it's really important to do that. If I'm out here saying that I'm trying to show people how this goes, then it's really important to show how you fail, so that people can, first of all, see that failure is part of it, because it is. And then also see, the ways in which I fail, and hopefully learn from my mistakes. So that video was for that freestyle deck, and it delaminated, which sucked because it's the prettiest deck I've ever made, but it's useless.
Right.
And I did this whole video about like, oh, the build was great, the art was great, and then, it came apart and I couldn't skate it. And while I was doing that, I saw that I had crumbled the bushings, and it was just like, boom! It was like a hammer hit. I'm like, dude, I gotta get out of here.
Right. But
So,
it really
yes.
showed, board sports don't have to be so extreme. And that was such a unique thing, I think, in all the stuff that I was trying to read and learn more about, not just you, but, board making and in the board sports in general. It feels very far and few between, except for maybe longboarding. And even now longboarding, like people are doing some pretty cool tricks, which I would pretty much break my ankles doing.
Yeah,
it's not necessary, right? You can just cruise. You can just go for a hike in the woods and just enjoy the scenery.
I think like, so for mountain boarding, we got here because you said that, I said it's a saturated market. And snowboarding and skateboarding specifically, street skating, is an especially saturated market. Mountain boarding is not. You're completely right. It's actually underserved. There's only like 2 or 3 major manufacturers in the world. And there's a lot of ways in which mountain boarding is just not what it could be, in my opinion. There's this thing I spoke to before of like people thinking that it's more dangerous than an average board sport. It's not. It was heavily advertised in its heyday as being like the more aggressive, hardcore version of snowboarding. There was a Jeep commercial that was it was a cool commercial, but it was like intense. There was a print ad that they'd run in snowboard magazines that the copy was, "You'll swear at snowboarding until you fall, and then you'll just swear." Just like, okay, clever, but probably not getting any groms into the sport, you know?
No.
And for snowboarding, you like, it's not advertised as something that you can do to chill. Every time you see snowboarding showcased, it is the really extreme stuff. But there's weekend warriors, and I would say that 90% plus of people in the sport are just doing that. They're just going and catching a chair and taking runs, and it's super fun. And you can. I've been last year. I got really into watching Ryan Napton. I don't know if you've seen any of his stuff.
I have not.
So he used to be a competitive, I think, pipe snowboarder, but now he's just kind of the best like board on snow snowboarder out there. He does all of these insane carving tricks where it's like flat ground, but he's just a joy to watch. And seeing him ride kind of opened up the possibility of like, man, you can have fun on a green. As long as you have enough speed to go, you can have fun. And you don't even have to push yourself too. It's just nice to get out and ride. And longboarding is really good for that. And commuting via longboard, skateboard, cruiser, whatever is good for that. And I think you're right. I think there's less of it in street skating. I think it's something that is available in mountboarding that really hasn't been tapped as like hey, this is a way to maybe get more people into the sport. You don't have to go off a 6 foot tall jump. Right. You can just ride down the hill. It's okay.
Well, one of like the earliest videos that I could find on mountain board was Rodney Castle demoing a mountain board in 1990 out in California.
Was it a frame board? Was it steel?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, wow, that's like first or second generation.
Tail was behind the rear set of wheels, so that you could still like ollie in some way. There was still a bit of a kicktail.
Oh, dude, I don't remember what those things are called. That was not the board I was thinking of, but I know what you're talking about.
And it sounded like it had like aluminum or steel fenders even on it. Like it had a weird noise when he was using it.
The beginning of mountboarding was the Wild West. It was nuts. There were 3-wheel boards for a while. There was a thing called a dirt surfer, which is a 2-wheel board that has got like big bike size wheels, which I still want. If anyone has a dirt surfer they want to send me,
bike sized wheels.
Yeah, they were like, I don't know, they were like a kid's bike. They were like, I don't know, maybe 18 inches. Yeah, so you'd stand in between them on this platform, and then the front one was on some kind of hinged mechanism where if you leaned, it would turn, and had a brake, which most mountain boarders don't, which most stock mountain boards don't have. You can add a brake to most of them, but and it was not like you couldn't do really freestyle with it or anything, but from what I understand, it was one of the most stable boards at speed, for the same reason that a bike is stable at speed, because these big gyroscopes at the nose and tail. I never got a chance to try one, so I know they're still around. Like,
we'll be on the lookout. We'll see if we can find one for you, Chris.
Yeah. I'd love that.
That would be outrageous. So for the channel, I know you mentioned, in the future maybe another snowboard and a few other things. Obviously, long term, you're hoping that Good Roads, becomes successful in its own nature as a company. What do you hope that people end up getting ultimately from the YouTube channel and from Good Roads?
Enjoyment, first of all. Like, that's something I haven't really figured it out how to tap, or whether or not I'm tapping it, because I watch a ton of craft videos for stuff that I don't do, or like I said earlier, that I have to keep telling myself not to do.
Right.
And I just like it. I just like watching people make stuff. I think that's probably true of most makers out there. So I hope at least at that level that I'm making content that people can enjoy. If you want to take it a step above that, if I can get you building gear, sick. Like, I am become hype, destroyer of expectations. Let's go. If I can get you making boards, it makes me so happy. I can't even tell you why.
Do you think you would ever like go back in time and do like a banana board build or something like that, or something silly?
Yeah. I think that'd be sick. I really want to do, after I've kind of done some of the more standard wheel shapes, I really want to do a Cadillac throwback. Do like the first urethane skate wheel. Do some kind of riff on that. I have no idea if this will ever happen, but I think it would be. There's a style of woodworking called Sloyd that I did as a hobby for a while. I may pick back up at some point. It's a green woodworking that's all hand tools.
Okay.
So use an axe or like a hand axe, a straight knife, and a hook knife, and there are a couple other things, a draw knife, stuff like that. It's really nice. You can make really cool houseware with it, and it's a really pleasant thing to do. It's like halfway between whittling and, I don't know, bowl turning maybe. But I think it'd be ridiculous to do like a Kid in King Arthur's court thing and go back and try to make like a medieval skateboard using medieval technology.
That would be pretty cool.
It's really funny because like I get a comment every now and then that's like, oh, next thing you know, this guy's gonna cut down his own tree and make his own veneer, and I'm like, yeah, don't tempt me with a good time. Like, I have other projects I have to do before I'm allowed to do that.
Well, with the 3D printing, I mean, as far as technology is concerned, maybe you are the one that will make Marty McFly hover.
Yeah, I've thought about it. You need 8 of the strongest EDFs on the market. I've looked into it, and I don't have that kind of money.
I imagine that you have. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I hope that everything goes well. Again, I really enjoy the T-Ride free ride. I think you should do another one of those, like this
I'd like to,
especially showcasing, where you go. The other thing that I actually noticed, one last thing, is the tow ride pole.
Yes.
I never found it in action.
It's not done.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, he put in a shitload of work fabricating this whole frame, the stand, getting the drum on, like just getting it all done. And I was like, well, where's the video where he's using it?
Yeah, it's most of the way there. I have to build a housing for it. So I've done more work that I haven't released on the channel yet. Those videos didn't do very well, which is a bummer. Those videos and the trail building videos, excuse me. I love doing that stuff. Obviously the mountboarding stuff too. It's just like, I'll take the hit on the channel to get mountboarding content out there because I want people to see it. But it doesn't have the built-in audience that the skate stuff does. And the trail building stuff, like the intersection of board sports and mountain biking and trail building, is like, I get why the videos don't do that great. The rope tow will, first of all, it was the wrong time of year because I was doing it in the spring. So if I start getting back into it now, I'll catch the beginning of the snow season. And I haven't done much trail building this year. I've been wrapped up in other projects, but now I need to get it done because I need it out of my garage because I need the space. So
gotcha.
I don't know where that is on deck right now, but I'm getting back to it soon.
Well, just don't forget to remind yourself that not every video has to be great, As long as you're having fun at the end of the day, like that's singularly the most important. I know you want to get, Good Roads off and running, but at the same time, right? If you're doing it in such a way that it just becomes unbearable, then it's not going to last very long. So just remind yourself to take a break here and there, bro.
Well, yeah, like I was saying before, I got to get better at that. But I've got so many projects going on that at this point, now that I'm trying to make it happen full time, I am able to pick and choose, right? So not showcasing the rope tow build didn't mean not putting a video out, putting a bad video out. All it meant was I got to work on it. I didn't have to film it, which let me work faster. And I didn't have the pressure of like figuring out angles and all that stuff. And I just showcased some other stuff that I was doing. So it all works out.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, again, I appreciate the time. Again, Chris McCann on YouTube, Good Roads. TheGoodRoadsCollective.com is his website. Chris from Good Roads on Instagram. Please check him out. And if you get into building boards, make sure you send him a shot. Make sure you send him a message. Let him know.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on, man. This was fun.
Yeah,
great conversation.
Can't wait till next time.